Okay, today we're going to look at Genesis chapter 13. And before we really continue Genesis 13, we really need to take a look at where we were before in Genesis 12. In Genesis 12, Abram just is leaving Egypt. Abram he didn't trust God. He didn't trust God that the promised land was exactly that, the promised land. Instead of being the land of promise, he thought it was a land of death, and he left. And we will see that that's going to have repercussions. In chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south." So Lot has now gone over, completely left Egypt, and now he is going down south, into the land of Canaan. And it mentions that Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And there's a reason that he has wealth. He has a lot of wealth, and he's a prosperous person, which means that when he is following the Lord, he is he's taken his sustenance with him. He had everything where he was at, and now he's taken all those things and trusting the Lord. And it says that in verse 3, and he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. So if you see on a map Bethel and Hai, you'll see these are just north of Jerusalem. Bethel is towards, it's a little corridor there, and Bethel is on the west part. Hai is on the east part. Bethel is going to be closer to the Mediterranean Sea. Ai is going to be closer to that little group of mountains. And it says that he pitches his tent where he had from the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar where he had made there at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. So there's something important to notice. When Abram disobeyed God, when he did not trust God, and he went to Egypt, what do we find him doing? He doesn't stay in Egypt. He returns to the place where he left. The very last place where God had spoken to him, that's where he goes. He returns to that place. And I think that's important in our own Christian lives, that we have got to be very cognitive of returning back to where we left. And so Abram did that, and Abram went to the place of worship, and he calls upon God again, and I think this is probably an act of contrition, an act of restoration, an act of, God, I blew it. I'm sorry, and he goes back to worship. He doesn't just simply say oopsie doodles. And then in verse 5, it says, "And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents." Now, Lot is a wealthy man. What would make him leave? What would make him leave the Ur of the Chaldees? What would make him leave this? He was established. He went because maybe there was a loyalty towards Abram, a love for Abram. But I think he absolutely recognized that the blessings of God were with Abram, that Abram was following God, and I think Lot knew the value of that. But when Abram goes into Egypt, guess who goes with him? Lot goes with him. Lot sees the man of faith show a lack of faith. But at least he comes out of Egypt also. And it says that Lot has flocks and herds and tents. Then verse 6 says, and the land was not able to bear them, that they may dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. So you have these great, these two great herds, not just herds, but people. There was maybe 1,000 people, maybe even more. But realistically, I would say 1,000 is an easy number of people that is with Abram and Lot. And they are having some issues. And so much that there was strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. Well, that's an interesting phrase that we see at the end of verse 7. Why mention this? Well, maybe it is mentioned because the Canaanite and Perizzite was there, that also strained the resources. But maybe it's also there to show that the Canaanite and the Perizzite, they are observing these issues of people. They're supposed to be following God. They're observing these things. They're observing these problems. And it's a poor testimony. And Abram said, verse 8, unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. Abram says, all right, we've got to stop these issues. There's no reason to have this. Verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Now that's interesting. Abram, who is the patriarch, who is the one who is, and by the way, patriarch kind of has a dirty word, a dirty definition to it nowadays, but it's a good word. Patriarch is a good word. It's that he's the father of. Matriarch is good. Patriarch is good. And so anyways, this patriarch of faith, this patriarch of who's over Lot, he does not say, okay, I'm going to go this way, now you go that way. He actually gives Lot the choice. Well, that's real humility there. And he gives Lot the choice to choose a direction, and Abram will gladly go the other direction. Now, I would like to stop here and say that Lot now has a few options. One, he could go left, or he could go right. That's the second option. He could go left and Abram will go right, or he could go right and Abram will go left. He could say, no, let's stay here and fight it out. He doesn't do that. But I think he had another option. I think he had a better option. I think probably what he should have said is he should have told the herdsman, you go wherever you want. I'm staying with Uncle Abram. I'm staying in the place of blessing. I'm staying with the man that's listening to God. But he doesn't do that. Verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, and that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's a little parenthetical statement there that, yeah, everything was good until it wasn't, until it got destroyed. But he saw, and it was watered everywhere, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest to Zoar. Well, now here's a question. Lot has fallen in love with Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? Because it's well watered. But it's not just that it's well watered. It reminded him of a place. Where did this beautiful area of Sodom and Gomorrah, where did this remind him of? Well, the Bible says the land of Egypt. Well, how does he know what the land of Egypt looks like? Because Abram, in his weakness, in his lack of trusting God, took his family, took everything, and went to Egypt. And I'm pretty sure that there was a great discussion on, it would be better for the family. The family will be hurt because we like worshiping the family a lot, to be honest with you. And Abram, instead of trusting God, instead of saying, we're going to follow the Lord, he said, well, what's going to be best for me and my family is that we go over here and we'll come back when things get better. But right now, I've got to do the best for my family. But we see very quickly it certainly wasn't the best for his wife. It wasn't the best for the people of Egypt. And we see here that it wasn't the best for his nephew, Lot, because it was there that Lot learned to judge things by his eyes. He judged the promised land as being a place of death. And he judged the place where God had not told him to go as the actual promised land. So now when he looks at the places of Sodom and Gomorrah, he says, yeah, this is a good place. Verse 11, then Lot chose from all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. And Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. And there's an interesting progression that we do see here, and it's people have mentioned it before that at first Lot just sees Sodom and Gomorrah, and then very quickly he begins to desire it, and then he pitches his tent towards it, and then we see him living there, and then we see him being one of the people, one of the important people there. That when we choose to live by sight, by the flesh, it's never as simple as we start out. It ends up controlling us. But anyways, verse 13, there's a caveat here. It says, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Now, here's a phrase that I think it's loosened a lot nowadays when we talk about the word sinners. When we see the word sinners, we kind of go, oh, well, we're all sinners. But that is not exactly, yes, the Bible certainly says all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But when the Bible goes out of its way to call people sinners, it means something. Remember, they had a problem with Jesus sitting with tax collectors and sinners? Or who are these sinners? Sinners are really the dregs of society. Now, of course, God, gives the idea that we are all sinners. So let's not think ourselves of being real hoity-toity. But the reality is that when somebody is described in the Bible, a group of people as sinners, just know they are exceedingly wicked. And so Lot leaves, and I wonder what Abram is thinking. Abram is his descendants were supposed to have this land, and really the only descendant he had was Lot, because he and Sarah, they didn't have any kids. So this one descendant leaves. And in verse 14, God speaks to him, and the Lord said unto Abram, Lord, that covenant name. The Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, see, there's an important thing here that God is speaking to Abram. And he says, Abram, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. Well, this is not just descendants anymore. God says, Abram, I want you to look all around you. And I want you to understand that all this is yours. But not only is all this yours, but I'm going to give it to your seed, the ones you don't have yet. Those are the ones I'm going to give it to. And I will make, verse 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth or the sand on the shore, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, the grains of dirt, then shall thy seed also be numbered. So not only is he saying, Abraham, I'm going to give you all this, but he says you're going to have kids, and your descendants are not going to be barely scraping by. They are going to be innumerable. Arise, verse 17, arise, walk through the land and the length of it and in the breadth of it, and I will give it to thee. And I like that Abram walks by faith and he sees these things. But I also like that God tells Abram, you don't have to work for this, but Abram, I want you to get a little bit of skin in the game, and I want you to see what I'm giving you. You know, could you imagine somebody giving you a brand new car and it's outside in the driveway? And say, hey, there's a brand new Camaro outside, or a brand new Porsche, or a brand new Land Rover. It's outside. Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm busy right now. I'll see it later. No, you would say that person must hate that gift. Well, God says, here's this exciting gift, and what does Abram do? He walks and he looks at all of it. He receives this beautiful gift. And the Bible says in verse 18, and Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and he built there an altar unto the Lord. And we see Abram doing what God told him to do. And then when he was done, what does he do? He worships. And I like that about Abram. Abram was a man who worshiped. You know, one of the things that is amazing is that people feel guilty, so guilty for not reading their Bibles. But I want you to think about something. You know, for really the last 1700 years, it was very uncommon for an individual to have a Bible. It was maybe if a church had a whole Bible, handwritten Bible, man, that was something serious and amazing. Even if you look at the front of, the King James, it says that it's supposed to be read in churches. Most people couldn't even fathom that normal people would have a Bible in their hands. Why am I mentioning that? Because Abram didn't have a Bible. Abram had God, and he worshiped him. And he worshiped him whenever he had an opportunity. I think many times we substitute Bible reading. And Bible reading's good, but we substitute that instead of genuine fellowship with God. Reading's easy. Having a relationship with God is a little bit tougher. It takes more effort on our part. And I think we need to be more like Abram and worship.